The winter morning in Boston begins with crystal clear air and soft sunlight. Melissa Howard gazed at the snow-covered common from the bay window of her home. This Beacon Hill neighborhood was where she was born and raised, and now, it was where she was about to begin a new chapter in her life. "I really have returned," Melissa whispered to herself. After finding success as an interior designer in New York, the decision to return to her hometown hadn't been easy. However, meeting David Clark had changed everything. Her relationship with the Harvard University architecture professor had brought unexpected happiness to Melissa's life. And now, they were busy preparing for their wedding, just 2 months away. The phone rang, pulling Melissa from her thoughts. "Hey, Melissa. How are the preparations for tonight's engagement party coming along?" Her mother Elizabeth's voice carried its usual understated concern. For Elizabeth, who lived in Boston's high society, her daughter's wedding was also an important social event. "I'm fine, Mom. Everything's going smoothly. Just..." Melissa hesitated for a moment. "Have you heard back from Caroline?" On the other end of the phone, she could hear her mother's breath catch. "Yes, she called yesterday. She said she's coming. She's coming home after all this time." Melissa felt a faint anxiety in her heart. Her sister Caroline had always attracted attention with her natural beauty and brightness since childhood, growing up with her parents' undivided love and affection. Unlike Melissa, Caroline had chosen a contrasting personality and lifestyle, and they had grown increasingly distant recently. "I see. That's good," Melissa replied, choosing her words carefully. In truth, Caroline's attendance stirred up complicated emotions. The sibling rivalry from childhood. Melissa had always worked diligently, putting her own growth first. In contrast, Caroline had paved her way with her natural charm. Her parents, too, had always shown special affection for this brilliant sister. Having finished her preparations, Melissa headed to the Beacon Hill restaurant that would host the engagement party. David had already arrived and greeted her with a warm smile as soon as he saw her. "You look beautiful today," David lightly kissed her hand. "Nervous?" "A little. It's been a while since the whole family gathered together." As Melissa answered, David gently squeezed her hand. "It'll be fine, I'm here with you." The party began as planned. Relatives and friends of the Howard and Clark families had gathered, and the venue was filled with a warm atmosphere. Melissa's father Joseph proposed a toast and offered words of blessing. Just then, the restaurant door opened, and a woman entered. The venue fell silent for a moment. Caroline appeared with the confidence of a movie star. Her gleaming blonde hair and dress forming a perfect silhouette. Her mere presence seemed to change the air in the room. "Sorry I'm late," Caroline's voice resonated pleasantly throughout the venue. After greeting her parents, she approached Melissa and kissed her on the cheek. "Congratulations. You've found a wonderful fiancé." Her words carried congratulations, but to Melissa, they sounded faintly sarcastic. "Thank you, Caroline. I'm glad you could come." Melissa's response was polite, but the subtle tension flowing between the sisters was undeniable. As the party progressed, Caroline quickly became the center of attention. There was always a crowd around her, and her laughter could be heard throughout the venue. What particularly bothered Melissa was the familiarity Caroline showed toward David. Touching his arm, whispering something in his ear, and sometimes laughing exaggeratedly together. Watching from a distance, Melissa struggled with the emotions welling up inside her. "This is a special day. Don't let it bother you," she told herself. Toward the end of the party, Caroline suddenly offered to give a speech. With all eyes on her, she raised her glass high. "I'd like to say a few words about my sister, Melissa." Caroline's voice mixed sweetness with sharpness. "Melissa is such a hard worker. She puts her all into everything, doesn't she?" She looked at Melissa with a meaningful smile. There seemed to be some unspoken message in her eyes. "I wish you all the happiness from the bottom of my heart." "Congratulations." The room filled with applause, but anxiety remained in Melissa's heart. Something lurking behind Caroline's words. But now wasn't the time to think about that. She took David's hand and smiled. No more strawberry accents, please. I want to keep it simple. Melissa was giving instructions to the cake designer when she heard her phone ring. With just 2 weeks until the wedding, she was busy with final preparations. Jennifer? What's up? I'm a bit busy right now. On the other end of the phone, the voice of Melissa's best friend, Jennifer Martin, was tense. Melissa, can you talk now? It's important. After gesturing to the cake designer to wait, Melissa stepped outside the patisserie. The streets of Boston, where the snow had begun to melt, still had a chilly spring breeze blowing. What happened? It's about Caroline. Jennifer's voice was low and restrained. She seems to be plotting something. Maria overheard Caroline talking with her friends. A cold feeling spread in Melissa's chest. What about? I don't know the details, but, apparently, they were talking about your past. She's telling her friends that you had plastic surgery. Melissa was at a loss for words. Her left cheek twitched involuntarily. Without looking in a mirror, she knew about that thin scar. And that there had once been a larger scar there. Melissa? Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine, she steadied her breath. Jennifer, thank you. But I won't let it bother me. This is my day. Whatever Caroline says, it won't affect me. After hanging up, Melissa stood there for a while. Memories from 9 years ago flooded her mind. Shortly after graduating from college, she had left Boston. Friends and family thought she had gone to Los Angeles for a job change. But in reality, Melissa. Turning around, she saw David standing in front of the shop. His presence alone calmed her heart. David, you came. I promised, didn't I? He placed his hand on her shoulder. Did something happen? You look pale. Melissa looked at him. David knew everything. Her past, the truth about her scars. She had kept nothing from him since they first met. And David had accepted her without judging her once. I got a call from Jennifer, it's about Caroline. What about her? David's voice mixed with wariness. She seems to be talking about my surgery. To her friends. David's face hardened. You have nothing to worry about. Only we need to know the truth. But what if, at the wedding? If anything happens, I'll handle it, he squeezed her hand. I'll protect you, I promise. That evening, Melissa visited her parents' home. In the living room, her father Joseph was reading a newspaper, and her mother Elizabeth was doing embroidery. The quiet daily life of a couple who had been together for nearly 50 years. Melissa, you're here, Elizabeth rose as soon as she saw her daughter. I'll make some tea. Where's Caroline? Melissa looked around. She came back yesterday, but she went out with friends today. Elizabeth read Melissa's expression and continued. You two still haven't reconciled? Melissa breathed deeply. We're not exactly fighting. Just. I understand, Elizabeth placed her hand over her daughter's. Caroline always wants to be the center of attention. For her, you getting married is. Are you saying she's jealous? Not exactly. Elizabeth chose her words. Unlike you, she's always been concerned with how others see her. She's anxious if she's not the best. So she's trying to bring up my past? Melissa's voice sounded more bitter than she had expected. What did you say? The color drained from Elizabeth's face. Melissa told her mother what she had heard from Jennifer. Elizabeth's expression hardened as she listened. That's unforgivable, Elizabeth's fingers were trembling. What you went through, and for her too. Mom, it's okay, Melissa tried to calm her mother. I'm happy now. David knows everything and accepts me. I don't care what Caroline says. But. Don't worry. The wedding will be wonderful, Melissa said, as if reassuring herself. After leaving her parents' home, Melissa adjusted the rearview mirror while driving to look at her face. The scar on her left cheek was barely noticeable. But without the makeup covering it, it would be more apparent. Beneath it lies a deep scar that once covered most of her face. 9 years ago, she wasn't in Los Angeles. Having suffered severe burns, she was receiving treatment at a specialized hospital in Phoenix, far from Boston. After 3 reconstructive surgeries, she gradually got used to her new face. Her choice wasn't for cosmetic purposes. It was a necessary choice to live, to fight the pain. She hadn't confided everything in Caroline not just because the sisters had grown apart. Caroline had always been valued for her beauty and took pride in it. Melissa didn't know how her sister would handle that fact. And now, that fear was becoming a reality. Upon returning to her apartment, Melissa headed to the bedroom closet. At the very back was a box she hadn't opened for years. Hesitantly, she took it out and spread its contents. Photos from before the accident, records of rehabilitation at the hospital, and photos of her face immediately after the accident. Skin and tissue damaged beyond recognition. "It's been a long journey," she whispered to the photos. A call from David brought her back to reality. "I'll come with you for the final fitting tomorrow," his voice gave her reassurance. "Thank you, David. I'm so glad you're here." After hanging up, Melissa put the photos back in the box and stored it at the back of the closet. The past was the past. She was about to begin a new life. "If anything happens, signal me right away," Jennifer whispered as she adjusted the hem of Melissa's wedding dress. The wedding had proceeded more smoothly than expected, and Melissa's worries were gradually fading. The ceremony at St. Paul's Church had been conducted solemnly, and now the reception was about to begin in the ballroom of a luxury hotel. "I'm fine," Melissa smiled at her friend. "I'm truly happy today." Those words weren't a lie. Standing next to David, making vows to share life with him, Melissa's heart was filled with peace. Her parents' tears of emotion, the warm blessings of friends, and above all, David's loving gaze. They were enough to dispel her anxieties. At the entrance to the reception hall, Melissa and David were introduced as bride and groom. Amidst the applause, they proceeded to the head table. Melissa's gaze naturally searched for Caroline. Her sister was wearing a flashy emerald green dress, sitting with a young man. When their eyes met, Caroline smiled and waved lightly. Nothing could be read from her expression. "She seems to be behaving herself," Melissa whispered to David. David squeezed her hand. "Today is our day. There's nothing to worry about." The reception proceeded smoothly. As the finest dinner was served and a jazz band played pleasant music, Melissa and David went around to each table, greeting the guests. As they approached Caroline's table, Melissa tensed. "Big sister, congratulations," Caroline stood up and embraced Melissa. "You look absolutely beautiful today." Her words sounded genuine. For a brief moment, Melissa was ashamed of her doubts. Perhaps it had all been unfounded worry. "Thank you, Caroline." "Oh, by the way," Caroline's eyes sparkled. "Would it be all right if I give a speech later? I'd like to offer my own words of blessing to the two of you." Melissa hesitated for a moment, but there was no reason to refuse. "Of course, gladly." David frowned slightly but said nothing. Nearing the end of dinner, the MC took the microphone. "Now, we'd like to hear a few words from the bride's sister, Caroline Howard." The venue grew quiet, and all eyes turned to Caroline. She slowly stood up and took the microphone. In a moment of tension, Melissa gripped David's hand tightly. "Good evening, everyone," Caroline's voice was clear. "Today is the most special day for my sister Melissa and her wonderful husband, David. I'm honored to stand here." She took a wineglass in hand and looked toward Melissa and David. Her smile was bright and friendly. "Let me tell you a bit about my sister, Melissa. Since childhood, she's been such a hard worker. A strong person who never gives up on anything. Melissa was about to breathe a sigh of relief. However, her blood froze at Caroline's next words. Especially when it comes to changing herself, she was really enthusiastic. Caroline's tone subtly changed. There's something I want everyone to know about her. Caroline suddenly picked up a tablet that had been placed on the table. Actually, my sister isn't the person you all think she is. She gestured toward the screen and operated the tablet. She's a monster who had plastic surgery 3 times. Look at the results of her efforts. What was projected onto the giant screen was the face of a young Melissa filled with pain. Disfigured skin from burns, medical bandages, and next to it, the beautiful face of the current Melissa. The venue was briefly filled with awkward laughter before falling completely silent. Melissa sat frozen. The blood drained from her face, and her hands began to tremble. The scar on her cheek felt hot and seemed to pulse. She had feared this moment would come. But when it actually happened, it was more painful than she had imagined. David's face was flushed with anger. He slowly stood up and glared at Caroline. As everyone in the venue watched with bated breath, he said in a quiet but dignified voice. "How dare you?" David's voice was low, but it resonated throughout the venue. He walked toward Caroline and stopped a few feet away from her. "Do you understand what you've just done?" Caroline faltered for a moment but quickly regained a challenging smile. "I just told the truth. Everyone has the right to know. She is so." Silence. David's word cut off Caroline mid-sentence. His voice was tinged with anger, but it also contained sadness. "Your actions are unforgivable." David returned to Melissa's side and sat down next to her. He gently took her hand and whispered in her ear, "I need your permission. May I tell the truth?" Melissa answered with trembling lips, "Please." David stood up again, this time taking the microphone. He looked around the room and took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special celebration tonight. And I find myself needing to share the truth with you all." His voice was calm, but there was unwavering determination in his eyes. "It's true that Melissa underwent surgery. But not for the reasons Caroline has suggested." David looked at Melissa tenderly. "The scars on my wife's face are proof of her courage and love." The venue was completely silent. The smile had vanished from Caroline's face, replaced by an expression mixing confusion and anxiety. 9 years ago, Melissa was involved in a traffic accident. Her car caught fire, and she suffered severe burns trying to rescue other victims before herself. David's voice trembled slightly. The surgeries she received were not for cosmetic purposes. They were medically necessary reconstructive surgeries to restore function and reduce pain. Sounds of shock and sympathy escaped from the audience. At the parents' table, Elizabeth was in tears, and Joseph was embracing her. The scars she bears are not the result of a plastic surgery, as Caroline claims, but the result of her courage and risking her life to save others. David looked at Caroline. "What you've mocked is the trace of your sister's courage and life-risking action." Caroline's face turned bright red, and she stood stunned, as if at a loss for words. Fear and regret showed in her eyes. "I fell in love with Melissa's courage and strength, and above all, her beautiful heart." David looked at Melissa again. "And today, I've become the happiest man in the world." Melissa slowly stood up. Though tears welled in her eyes, her posture was dignified. She took the microphone with trembling hands. "I'm not ashamed of my face or my past." Her voice was small at first but gradually grew stronger. "I just didn't want to bring up the past on this special day." She looked at Caroline for a moment. Tears were welling in her sister's eyes too. "But as David says, this is part of me. And I want you all to know the truth." Melissa took David's hand. "My scars will never disappear, but they are my pride. And today, I am truly happy to begin a new life with this wonderful person." Warm applause erupted from the venue. In the guests' eyes, there was no mockery, but emotion and respect. Caroline stood rooted to the spot, unable to say anything. Her plan had completely backfired. The secret she had intended to expose had instead proven the strength and beauty of Melissa and David's bond. David embraced Melissa and gently kissed her cheek. "You're the most beautiful bride," he whispered. "And your strength never ceases to amaze me." Melissa smiled. There was no longer fear in her eyes. Instead, hope and joy for her new life shone bright. Caroline was quietly leaving her seat, about to exit the venue. However, before she reached the door, Melissa's voice stopped her. "Caroline." The sisters' gazes crossed. At that moment, something unspoken flowed between them. Sadness, regret, and a faint hope. There was understanding rather than anger in Melissa's eyes. Standing on the hotel balcony, Melissa looked down at the lights of nighttime Boston. Despite the unexpected turn of events, the reception was once again proceeding splendidly. Guests were dancing on the dance floor, and laughter and music filled the venue. However, her heart was a little distant. "So this is where you were?" Turning at David's voice, she saw him standing with 2 champagne glasses. "I needed some air," Melissa answered as she took the glass. "Is everyone okay?" "They're worried about you. But everyone seems to hold you in high regard." He stood next to Melissa, gazing at the city lights. "What about Caroline?" "Mom is talking with her in a hotel room." Melissa's voice was tinged with fatigue. "I thought today would be ruined, but..." "Not at all." David touched her cheek. "Rather, your courage moved everyone. Everyone here today witnessed your courage and strength." Melissa smiled. "It's all thanks to you." "No, I just told the truth. You never needed to hide it." Silence enveloped them. A distant church steeple gleamed as if floating in the night sky. "David, I'm glad I met you," Melissa said suddenly. "If I hadn't been in that accident, I wouldn't have gone to Los Angeles, and then I wouldn't have met you." David squeezed her hand. "That's the way fate works." A knock made them turn around. Caroline stood on the other side of the door. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and in contrast to her glamorous dress, she looked dejected. "May I talk to you?" Her voice trembled. Melissa and David exchanged glances. He nodded slightly and was about to leave to give them space to talk alone. "No, David, you stay too," Caroline quickly said. "I want to apologize to you as well." The 3 sat at a table on the balcony. Caroline covered her face with both hands, exhaled deeply, then looked up. "I'm truly sorry." Genuine remorse showed in her eyes. "What I did is unforgivable." "Why did you do it?" Melissa asked quietly. Caroline stared at her hands. "It was jealousy." Her voice was small. "I always felt like you were better than me. You were good at studying, talented, and yet, always humble, always grateful to those around you." She gave a bitter smile. "Ironically, when you disappeared, I had to face myself without you for the first time. In our parents' eyes, I was no longer compared to you but evaluated as myself. So when I came back..." Melissa continued. "Yes, when you came back, I was afraid of returning to your shadow," Caroline admitted honestly. "And when I heard about the scars on your face, I thought I could use that. By hurting you, I could stand above you. But the truth is, I respected you." Caroline's voice shook. "I wanted to be strong like you. But I didn't know how to become like you." David looked at Caroline with stern eyes, but at the same time, there was a hint of understanding in his expression. "Jealousy blinds people," he said quietly. "But acknowledging the truth here and now takes courage." "I'm sorry for hurting you both," Caroline cried again. "Especially you, Melissa. What you experienced. I can't even imagine. And to use that as a weapon today." Melissa was silent for a while. Various emotions swirled in her heart. Anger, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation. "After that accident, I had to change how I saw myself," Melissa began quietly. Until then, I had taken my appearance for granted. But suddenly, when it was all taken away, I had to find strength within myself. She looked at Caroline. Ironically, that accident might have liberated me. Because it gave me the opportunity to find my true self, beyond appearances. We were both hurting in different ways, Caroline murmured. Maybe so, Melissa agreed. But don't think I can easily forgive what happened today. I need time. I understand, Caroline nodded. Just, if you give me a chance to make amends. After a long silence, Melissa finally spoke. We might be able to start our relationship over. But it will take time and, above all, honesty. David placed his hand on Melissa's shoulder. Today is a special day. A day of new beginnings. Perhaps it's the same for you sisters too. When the three returned to the hall, the party was still in full swing. Caroline quietly headed to her seat, and Melissa and David proceeded to the dance floor. Are you okay? David asked, holding her. Yes, Melissa smiled. Today took an unexpected turn, but maybe it was for the best. I don't need to hide anymore. You are truly beautiful, David whispered in her ear. Both inside and out. She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. The music enveloped them, and the lights in the venue shone around them. Having faced and overcome a painful past, Melissa was now taking the first step in her new life here. And she knew that the road ahead would not always be smooth. That reconciliation with Caroline would not be achieved overnight. Still, she could continue to move forward. Because she was no longer alone. On a Saturday spring afternoon, a year after the wedding, the living room of Melissa and David's Cambridge home was filled with afternoon sunlight. Through the large windows, a newly planted cherry tree could be seen in the backyard, with members of a support group gathered around it. Shall we begin, everyone? Melissa stepped out into the garden and quietly called out. Beyond Scars, which she had founded, was a support group for people struggling with the after effects of burns and accidents. Once a month, she opened her home to provide a place for sharing experiences together. We have a special guest today, Melissa smiled at the group. My sister, Caroline. From the corner of the garden, Caroline slowly stepped forward. Compared to a year ago, she was thinner, without flashy makeup, and appeared in simple attire. But what had changed most was her expression. The former arrogance and anxiety had disappeared, replaced by a quiet composure. Hello, Caroline said with a bit of nervousness. I am not someone who has experienced this, but I'd like to listen to your stories today. Some in the group looked at her with caution. Caroline's actions at the wedding were known among Melissa's close friends. However, Melissa gently placed her hand on her shoulder, reassuring her. Over the past year, the sisters' journey had not been smooth. Even though Melissa sent letters many times, there was no reply from Caroline for a long time. Her parents worried about Caroline and told Melissa that she had moved to Los Angeles. Then, 3 months ago, a sudden phone call came. They found a tumor on my face, Caroline's voice trembled even over the phone. It's benign, but I need surgery to remove it, and it might leave a scar on my face. It was an ironic twist of fate. Caroline, who had found value in her beauty throughout her life, was now facing the fear of her appearance changing for the first time. And she had sought help from the sister she had once mocked. As the support group meeting ended and members were preparing to leave, Caroline approached Melissa. Listening to them, I realized how shallow I've been, she said quietly. I might understand a little of how you felt every day. Melissa smiled. We all grow in our own ways. David came out to the garden with drinks. Caroline, are you ready for the surgery? It's next week, right? Caroline nodded. I'm a bit scared. I wish I had my sister's courage. I'll be there for you, Melissa promised. It's hard at first, but with time, the scars become a part of you. In the garden where twilight was approaching, the three sat quietly. The former conflicts hadn't completely disappeared, but a new understanding and respect had been born. We're family, Melissa took Caroline's hand. From now on, let's heal each other's wounds. Cherry blossom petals danced in the wind, falling around the three like symbols of a new beginning. True beauty lies not in appearance, but in compassion for others and the courage to grow. Through their respective pains, Melissa and Caroline had arrived at this truth.